Alright. I don't really have a significance behind this one. I just wanted to do these two. Well, I do feel. While Lakeview Terrace has a lot of different themes going on, I do feel like these two have, a lot in common in their basic plot. The whole. That now age-old story about when the cops are the bad guy in your movies, they typically become obsessed with you, and you can't call the cops on them because they are, in fact, the law. So, if you've seen both of them, I think it's pretty clear with this. There's another one that could have fit in here, but I'll talk more about that when we get to Unlawful Entry, because it's more up that alley. But I'm going to actually start with Lakeview Terrace, which I've probably mentioned at least a few times. I know Neil Abu's name's come up a lot. And this is a movie that came out 8 years ago, almost. It was September of 2008, I think. And the plot isn't all that original when you have movies like Unlawful Entry that were almost 20 years before it. But it has its own things up its sleeve. Starting with, I was actually the other day. This just came on like IFC or something, and it started, and I didn't know what was coming on. I was just kind of watching it start with the Screen Gems logo and all that, and the score. And it's not something I'd ever really thought about watching it before, but this is one of those cases where when I didn't know what it was and I heard that score as the movie was starting, just showing the Screen Gems logo, the score had put itself in my head so deeply that I immediately knew what it was as soon as I heard that score and saw the logo. And the score is Michael Dana and Jeff, I think is the other one's name. I'm assuming they are brothers. I am not positive. But we're going to go with that, just for the sake of moving on. And what the point I'm getting at with that is that this is definitely one of those movies that really, really ingrains itself in your head, if it has that impact on you. And it's not... I've come to learn that a lot of people, like quite a few people, are not as impacted by this movie as I was. Roger Ebert in his 4-star review was, but that's about it. It's not like a hated movie or anything, thankfully. But it's definitely, I feel like it doesn't near have the reputation that it should. Because this is definitely the setup for like a classic thriller. Like I've pretty much every time, like ever since it came out, I've been saying that Abel Turner feels so much like a character you would have seen in a Hitchcock movie. Just the way his behavior escalates and how don't do that, it's distracting.
Sorry, it's just something I saw that was kind of cool.
And the way his behavior escalates and how he kind of goes about building this, the way the tension is built throughout the whole thing, it's very... I watched it again recently. It's not as slow burn as I remember it being. We actually kind of get to where Abel's headed pretty fast. But they still do it in a way to where they build the character to where you kind of immediately know he's a racist dick. Like, that's just kind of apparent. There's no real build up to that. It's the fact that it's quite a long time before we realize that he's actually legitimately dangerous. And yeah, he does do things that are quite questionable, but we never... there's a bit... I mean, obviously, we've all seen a thriller in our lives, so we know the truth, but there's no concrete evidence for a while that he's the one that, shut off the air conditioning and took the screw and put it through the cigarette and stuff like that. Psycho stuff like that. There's no clear evidence for a while in the movie that he's doing this, but still, there is enough build-up to where there is a nice kind of gradual flow to where he gets to where we ultimately find him. And yes, these moments where it's, I mean, we do get a sense that he's aggressive, because there's the whole, obviously the movie has a whole racial theme to it, and it also delves into the whole police brutality and excessive force stuff. And there's the moment when we see he and Jay Hernandez have pulled over that criminal, and they, like, the criminal compares him to Popeye Doyle with his with his tactics. And when he, like, puts the stick up to his throat and, like, chokes him with it, we know he's aggressive, and we know that he's racist. But still, there is, in fact, a gradual build to where he gets worse as the movie progresses. But for a while there, it's the stuff, mainly the interactions between him and Patrick Wilson. When, like I said, the fact that he's racist there's no hiding that, ever. And he's not the kind of person that wants to hide it. The whole idea is that he wants Chris to know that he doesn't like him, basically, because he's white. And I love that little moment when they're in the driveway and he's just kind of talking to him. And this is kind of the first time they've interacted. And when Chris pulls up, he's blaring rap music. And there's the whole irony of, he's upset that Chris has a black wife who is Kerry Washington. And he's saying, I assume you got into rap because you got a black wife. And he's like, actually, it's the opposite. I'm the rap fan and she hates it. And then the scene ends with him kind of shining his flashlight in Chris's face and saying, you can listen to that stuff all day, but you'll still be white. And he just walks away. And another thing that we know that kind of shows us that he's not, like, they're not showing us that he's full-on psycho immediately. One of the big clues to this also is that his kids are quite stable. Regardless of how he raises them under that really, iron hand, he's the daughter is very much a normal teenage girl with the music and the defiance and the skimpy clothes and all that. And the son, Marcus, is, like, a nice kid. There seems to be nothing wrong with them as far being brought up by him, so there can't be anything too wrong. That's what we think, of course. And as I was saying, of course, and that's the thing is, regarding this, is the racism also seems to kind of go past. There's one line that just flies by really quickly. And it seems like it goes past the fact that he doesn't like that Patrick Wilson and Kerry Washington are in an interracial relationship. There's also maybe this means nothing, by the way, but it's just a line that's always kind of caught my attention, and it's when he's going on his kind of tirade, and in the middle of it, he makes reference to some old Jew, and it makes me. I feel like the racism goes farther than just he doesn't like interracial relationships, all the way into. Maybe he's anti-Semitic? I don't really know. It's one line, and it goes by really fast. But just his delivery of the phrase, some old Jew, makes me think there's a lot of prejudice inside Abel. And just, quite literally, not just black and white. Though there is once, and sometimes it's kind of there, and they don't, there's this moment when he shows up for the house party, and he's brought a gift for Kerry Washington. And they don't draw attention to it at all. You have to, like, really look, too, to even see it. And the only way she reacts is, oh, thanks, and she just takes it and walks away. But the gift that he gives her is just a book. and the book is just called Black. It's like, they don't even draw attention to that. But it's in there. And the great thing here, that really, really makes this, there is something, like, this movie could very easily just be, some by-the-numbers thing, but not only do we have, the prejudice themes in there, and, even throwing in the corrupt cop stuff and stuff like that, what really, really holds this movie together, is Samuel L. Jackson's performance. Which is just it seems like it gets better every time I watch it too. And I've seen this movie quite a few times.
Yeah, you very much love this movie.
And there's just so much, like, you can buy him for like, it's that whole transition of, is he menacing or is he just a dick? For a while there, he has that where you're not quite sure which one he is, and it's very easy to buy him as either one. It's just those moments when he's kind of his first few interactions with Patrick Wilson, when he's just leaning on the car and talking to him in the driveway. He just has such a real, intimidating presence about him. To where you can kind of... And it's not even just that all that hatred that's lurking inside him. But there's just something about just his... I don't know if it's his demeanor or just what it is, but there's something that makes you incredibly uncomfortable every time you see him. And it's really interesting to watch those scenes where it's clear that Chris is some jock type. And has been, and that's basically, he's basically used to being that jock type that's kind of above everybody else. He has the lacrosse stick when he has to go investigate, and he does the whole macho thing about how he has to be, Kerry Washington can't take care of anything, he's the man and he must take care of everything, and he's always like this, but then every time he's around Abel, he shrinks down to this. Every time. And it's always, I'm pissed off, I'm gonna go confront him, and then every time he's face to face with Abel, just Ant-Man. Just just right down to it. Yes, Night Owl becomes Ant-Man. That's what Nick Fury does. It's just all connects.
So many superhero references.
So, anyway, and then the whole another thing they bring into this, this movie was so on top of what was happening at the time it came out. Because another big focus is the fires in California, which is really interesting how that's kind of always looming in the background, and how as the fires are getting closer and it's always so hot in all the scenes, there's just this constant tension building as, like, the temperatures are rising, and a fire is slowly coming this way, and is going to engulf everything. It's very... Obviously not quite to this extent, but it seems so much, like I was saying, like a Hitchcock tactic. A way of building tension. It's easy and probably a bit overdone, but increasing heat is a really good use of rising tension. Because nobody likes that. But on top of this, there's also the whole... And for a while, it's just a petty neighbor thing. Like with the floodlights coming into their bedroom. That he uses for security. Which, of course, keep them awake at night. And so the idea is, we'll just go tell Abel to shut them off. But because Chris is always shrinking in front of Abel, and Abel is so fucking scary when you're trying to confront him about something, this hardly gets taken care of at all. And in fact, only gets worse. And I really love that scene, and it really shows the menace that Jackson has in this performance. It's when we're finally starting to get to a turning point to where he's standing up to Abel more, and he's ready to just say, fuck off. Because Abel's already made it apparent by this point that he wants Chris out of the neighborhood completely. And that he doesn't like him. For prejudicial reasons. So finally, Chris confronts him, and he's saying, you just stay out of my life. And it's this whole... The way the lights kind of act as this thing where it's Abel penetrating himself into their lives, and quite literally through their bedroom. Just as soon as Chris says, I want you to stay out of my life, and Abel says, stay out of your life, the lights come on. And then he has that look in his eyes that's really... when he says, you have a good night, Chris. It's like, there's just no fucking way you're gonna be able to deal with this. And I really... And the following scene, when they realize somebody's broken in and slashed the tires and all that, the way Abel's just kind of sitting up on the balcony. I love his delivery of when they ask, "Did you see anybody?" and his response is, "I just see you." And it's he's so it's great. It's awesome. And then going on the whole idea that it's all about racial prejudice and stuff like that, but then you get into the aspect of his job. It's probably a little cheesy. I'm sure it's a little cheesy, but to be honest, it's probably my favorite line in the movie because it's really cool. And that is when they're talking to Ron Glass, who is Kerry Washington's dad, and he's telling them about how they're gonna the different ways they can try to deal with the Abel situation. And he says the only problem is that he has an advantage because of the color issue. And he says in this case that color is blue. And it's like that's such. Like I said, I know it's cheesy and obvious, but it's a really cool line. So I love the way they incorporate so much that was important at the time and still is now into this. And like I said, this movie is 8 years old now, and all this stuff is still quite prominent. A lot of it. And there's and talking about plot wise, it's one of those movies that's also really good about the way it moves along. The exposition is pretty smooth. Because there's a lot of exposition that needs to be had about the whole she wants to have a baby and he doesn't, and then there's Abel's whole backstory. But every time they say something that's expositional, it actually sounds like people talking for real. There's nothing real forced about it, and for how much exposition they need to go through, that's pretty good. That's some pretty good writing there. And then there's the whole okay, there is one scene here I'm not so sure about. And that is not so much the scene itself, but I feel like it happens pretty late. And that's the trees. When Chris decides to be a nuisance on purpose, he's going to bring in all those trees and line them up against the fence until they go over into Abel's yard. And Abel gets pissed off, whips out a chainsaw and tries to take them out. That happens quite late in the movie when the tension is really, really starting to reach its peak. And that's, Abel kind of going at them with a chainsaw through the fence, and Chris getting so out of control that he actually knocks Kerry Washington to the ground. Does add for some intensity, but there's also such an absurdity to the scene that it still kind of feels like we're in the petty neighbor phase, and like it's a scene that should have happened a lot earlier than it does. But that's one thing, because the only other complaint I have reaching the end of this is for a movie that builds tension really, really well and kind of moves along so smoothly, the climax is really abrupt. Like, we get to the climax, like, way too fast. Like, there could have been, like, a good 20 minutes in between Chris finding out that the guy that broke into their house was there because of Abel, and then how the climax plays out. There could have been a good 15 to 20 minutes in between that we could have built some more, until finally he and Abel just attack each other, and ultimately leads to one of their demises. And there's, and if I just have to throw one more critique out there real quick, which is, this is nothing too bad, it's just something you can't help but notice. This is clearly one of those movies that was supposed to be rated R. And I think it definitely could have benefited from being, like, when you kind of have that in your head and you kind of see some stuff in there, it's clear this movie was watered down kind of at the last minute. They got 2 F-bombs in there, which is nice. But you can kind of tell there was some kind of cutting around. Like I said, it feels like the scenes that kind of increase in violence seem like they could have, like they were going to go a little farther and then they didn't. And then there's the really obvious one when Abel pulls the gun on the guy that he hired, and he's just right before he kills him, and he says, "What the hell, dude?" when so very, very clearly his mouth reads, "What the fuck, dude?" It's like, that's kind of... You want to really clean that stuff up if you're going to do that. But yeah, I feel like, with... and some of the stuff, if you, like the sexual relationship between Patrick Wilson and Kerry Washington, it feels like they wanted to go a little farther with that, as far as what they showed us. But those scenes are very heavily edited, as you can tell. Like they initially weren't. So that kind of shows a little bit. But I mean, for the most part, it's pretty... I spent quite a bit of time saying there's 3 or so flaws. But they're, in the grand scheme, they're very small. This is a really, really well-constructed movie. And it's a top 5 movie of 2008. And that's not a year to just, shake a stick at either. That's some pretty stiff competition. The Oscars didn't show it, but 2008 was actually a pretty good year for movies. And this was right up there in the top 5 of those for me. Like I said, it's mainly anchored by, it's held together by Jackson's really, really fantastic performance. I don't know why I didn't take notice before, because obviously he had one of my favorite performances of all time, and in my favorite movie of all time is him. So you would think, but his roles have been as he's been in more and more movies throughout the years, I just keep realizing he's like probably, this might sound like hyperbole and everything, but I'm kind of being dead serious here. He's legitimately one of the best actors we have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't get really that credit because people just kind of see him as the badass, like Snakes on a Plane. And they, like, the motherfucker guy. He's like, and the line from A Time to Kill everybody likes to quote. It's like, yeah, he's Samuel Jackson, he's the bad motherfucker guy. Serious, and that totally dismisses the fact that he's, like, one of the best working actors right now. Like acting for real. Not just walking in saying motherfucker and shooting some dudes. The dude can act. It's insane. Like, I know Pulp Fiction is known for showing us that he gave one of the best performances of all time once. But he's still that good.
Oh yeah,
he's still that good. People need to notice that. So yes. I really, really love this movie, if you hadn't caught on. So, yes. Now, real quick, let's go over to Unlawful Entry, which takes us back quite a few years. Now, something that maybe would have made sense to do, if it weren't for the fact that I already kind of talked about this movie way back in the day. When you look at Unlawful Entry, if you think of comparing movies, the first one you probably think of is Internal Affairs. The Mike Figgis movie with Richard Gere. But since I already talked about that movie forever and a half ago, this is how we're doing it. And I'm more comfortable with this one anyway. This one works for me. But the interesting thing that Unlawful Entry does is, for starters, let's make it abundantly clear that Unlawful Entry was made in 1992. Let's make that abundantly clear because the movie makes that abundantly clear. But let's just establish this before we continue now. So we know up front that the plot is that Kurt Russell and Madeline Stowe are a happily married couple, and Ray Liotta is the cop that finds himself into their lives, which is nice for a little bit until it's not. And a lot like thrillers in the 90s, there was a while there where directors could not tell the difference between thriller and horror.
Yeah.
And this movie spends a lot of its time confused in that department. Because the very start of this movie is an intruder breaking into their house. This is what starts the whole thing off. In the first 5 minutes or so of this movie, this intro, I don't feel like I'm watching a thriller or even like a crime drama of sorts. It feels like a horror movie. It's pretty creepy, actually. I mean, no, good on them. They made the scene creepy, and I assume it's supposed to be, and that's what it is. That's good. It's just that it's very interesting tone-wise. But regardless, Ray Liotta is the cop that comes to investigate him and his partner. And eventually, Liotta tracks the guy down and basically gives Kurt Russell the chance to take revenge out. Because he, took Madeline Stowe and held a knife to her neck and all that. And Kurt Russell's pissed about it and wants to do something about it. But Ray Liotta kind of goes the extra mile, if to put it lightly, and says, "Here, I caught him. If you want to, you can beat him to death. Do it." And he's just like, he practically tries to force him to do it, and then gets upset when he doesn't. And then immediately, for a while in these movies, that's another thing to its credit, is usually in movies like this, it takes a long time for the protagonist to realize that the antagonist is a psychopath. Kurt Russell's character wastes no time. Like, the second he sees... Like, 1 minute he and Ray Liotta are best friends. The next, Ray Liotta has beaten that dude almost to death, and Kurt Russell says, "Well, I never want to talk to you again."
Yeah.
Because you are crazy. Not only because I watched you almost beat a guy to death, but because you are played by Ray Liotta. In the 90s. Early 90s Ray Liotta. Off the fucking wall.
Oh, yeah.
This is 2 years after Goodfellas and 5 years after Something Wild. And I will bring those movies back into this. Now, before we go on... that is a really good scene, by the way. Like, the whole start of this movie, once it kind of figures out what tone it's going to be, we've got a good thing going here for a while. And that's not to say the movie doesn't stick with it. The movie is consistently, fun and exciting and good and all that. It's just that, yes, let me go, I'll just go into it. Now, the interesting thing, though, that this movie brings on is that after this really good scene, when Kurt Russell ultimately refuses to take the opportunity to take revenge, quite an interesting moral dilemma is brought on us. Yeah, Unlawful Entry has a moral dilemma in it. And that is that Kurt Russell thought he was doing the right thing by not beating the guy. And it turns out that Madeline Stowe's kind of a little upset about it. And kind of sees... I mean, not to the point to where she's like, "You should have killed him for me," or anything. She's not that kind of character. But she feels like he's blowing it way out of proportion. Because Ray Liotta's trustworthy, right? Early 90s Ray Liotta is so very trustworthy. I make jokes like this, but Ray Liotta's performance in this movie is actually something to be quite commended, because he really actually does do that balance really well. Where 1 minute you want him to be your best friend, and the next you want to completely run the other direction. There's a really good scene when he's doing, like, I don't know if it's like a career day thing or what it is, but it's Ray Liotta as this character talking to a classroom full of children. And he has such a lovely presence. Like, he's the most likable person on earth. Like, you want to immediately invite this guy to dinner when he's talking to these kids. But this is after we know partially what he's capable of. We don't know everything he's capable of yet. But by this point, we know he's at least capable of going crazy and beating people. And of course, there's another interesting thing thrown into the mix here, where we know there's something lurking inside Liotta. But his partner is a legitimate good guy. Like, his partner is like, an actual good guy cop. Which, once again, we've seen a thriller in our life, so we know, sadly, this person is probably ill-fated. Yeah. But I really like that whole idea of, we're kind of slow. It seems like, nobody knows about Liotta's, what's going on internally. Like, he's kind of, like everybody's going to see him as the good guy until by the end of the movie he comes out as a monster. But quite early in the movie, it's established that his partner's used to his bullshit. He's used to Liotta being this weird, overly attached guy. I thought it was really clever of the screenplay to throw that in there, especially so early. Where Liotta has this way of attaching himself to people, and the partner's always there to say, "Dude, I've seen this happen before. You gotta knock that off. Come on." Of course, he's unaware that he's unaware exactly how far what's inside Liotta goes. Which of course, he ultimately learns the hard way. Because you can't be the good guy partner to the bad guy. That's just not how it works. You will die. The title immediately is just a fatal consequence. There's just no way around it. Another thing that really helps this movie click and makes it work regardless of how off the wall it ultimately gets, is this whole thing going on between Kurt Russell and Madeline Stowe. Normally in movies like this, the married couple is very much, both of them are kind of devices in their own different way, and they really don't feel like an actual married couple. Like, in a lesser movie, it's like, the husband exists to do this thing and the wife exists to do this thing, but they don't even necessarily feel like a married couple. It just kind of feels like they're only a married couple because she's going to be in distress at the end and he has to save the day. But throughout the movie, the way Kurt Russell and Madeline Stowe play it, they actually feel like a legit married couple. Like, you can actually buy the characters as that. And how, like, they kind of know each other and how they kind of know each other's, actions and how things will play out with the other and how they kind of just go along with that. And you feel like that you feel like they're actually two people that have known each other for years, which is something you don't typically get from a married couple in a generic thriller. Because it's always, there's actually, this is kind of, it works in the context of Lakeview Terrace, but it kind of sounds like I'm throwing a bit of shade at Lakeview Terrace by saying this, but yeah, Lakeview Terrace does have the scene where Patrick Wilson says to Kerry Washington, "It's like I don't even know you. I don't even know who I married," which is kind of how it typically plays out. But in this movie, Kurt Russell and Madeline Stowe never forget who they married. They always know what's going on with the other, and they kind of keep those, and that's something quite rare in movies like this. But then, like I said, there's some, it gets pretty off the wall. There's the scenes when he starts to, I feel like the cable guy borrowed a lot from this movie.
I can see that. I really can see that now you've mentioned it.
And there is, come to think of it, the cable guy might actually be, like, an intentional spoof almost strictly of Unlawful Entry. But the thing is you have stuff in there, obsessive thriller stuff that had been going on for quite some time by this point. Like I've already talked about, Fatal Attraction. Like I said, it goes all the way back at least to Play Misty for me. At least when they got to this kind of level. The I'm Obsessed With You thriller has always been around. But they start to, in the fashion of those movies, they start to kind of throw in stuff that's a little out there. Like none of Kurt Russell's credit cards are working suddenly. And then he has a boot on his car. And he's saying, like, Ray Liotta put a boot on my car. Somebody must do something about this. He's abusing his power and stuff like that. And his lawyer basically says, can you prove that he's the one that put a boot on your car? It's like, I don't know what all goes into this, but I would think enough stuff would have to go into putting a boot on someone's car for it to be able to be linked back to the person that ordered it.
Yeah.
I would think that. I don't know, but I'm not an expert. But I would think, yeah, I'd say if he put a boot on my car, I could probably prove somebody did. And it'll most likely be him when you backtrack it, but no. He just leaves it at, no, I can't prove it. Fuck! Thriller rules. He just goes about with his torture. I'm not sure how they did the canceling credit cards thing, but I don't know. And the problem here is, I'm gonna throw this in here real quick. Obviously, he ends up arrested too at some point. It was always gonna happen. Something happened to the cable guy. Of course. And we see a face, it goes on to be something, and actually did another gigantic movie with Kurt Russell many, many years later. By that I mean last year for us. He's arrested and he's sitting on the bench, and who is sitting next to him in a non-speaking role? Jaimin Hounsou. Credited just as Jaimin. Yeah, he's been around since 1992.
God.
Then he went on to get 2 Oscar nominations. It's insane. Okay, but here, let's talk about when the movie goes off the wall, though. And that is when it turns into... There's a little bit of Hand Ross the Cradle in this, too. Like when he kills the friend and puts her in the closet and the arm comes down. And it's like, okay, we're back in horror now. The movie refound itself. But here's the problem, though, is with the kind of movie this is, Liotta's character, he's the kind of crazy that doesn't seem to match up with this kind of movie. You know what I mean? This is almost like a crime drama with some of that obsession stuff thrown into it. But Liotta's character, by the end of the movie, seems like he should be the killer in Maniac, the movie about the mannequins. Where he gets really off the wall crazy, and there's not really a whole lot in the movie that brings us to this point. It's like, well, the climax is gonna happen. He just needs to get as fucking crazy as possible. It's like, before his partner, I don't even know if there's any real hint that he's ever killed anybody, like, in cold blood.
This takes one.
That is a cool scene, though, when we see him, like, it makes him really scary when we see him from his partner's perspective as he's dying. But even so, yeah, this movie gets real off the rails. And it's one of those movies where, like I said, it seems like he's suddenly in a different movie. Liotta's one of those characters where the movie goes in such horror mode that he fake dies like 3 times so that he can jump back up. He even practically does the Michael Myers sit-up. Like when he just kind of appears behind Kurt Russell's shoulder with the blood running down his face. And then when he, like, jump scares out of the closet, it's like, what the fuck did this movie turn into? And then ultimately the scene when, it comes back to the scene when he attacks Kurt Russell. And Kurt Russell says, what are you gonna do? Arrest me? And Liotta puts a gun in his face. And he's like, I can kill you, because I'm the law. And so, that has to come back. And they're fighting, and then Kurt Russell pulls a gun on him. And then he's, like, what am I gonna do? Arrest you? And then he shoots Liotta dead. And it's at this point you realize he just shot to death an unarmed cop.
Yep.
And the only evidence he has is his wife paying witness. But because it's a 90s thriller, we will not explore these consequences. Almost every 90s thriller like this ended the exact same way. You shoot the antagonist dead, and you sit there with your love interest or wife or whatever, and you just kind of take in that it's all over, and then the credits roll. It's like, how is he going to explain? Because everybody was pretty much still on Liotta's side. Because the only person that knew Liotta was fucked up was his partner, who is dead now. His partner was the only one that could have proved it, and his partner is dead. That was a whole plot point. And so it's not like... And he wouldn't have had time to, plant a gun or anything, because the cops are, right there. That's the whole thing, is the cops are here, we're safe. It's the classic 90s thriller ending of the credits rolling over as the cops are outside the house. It's exactly what it is. And it's like, what we're not seeing, because the credits are rolling and we're outside, is he explaining, oh yeah, so he attacked me, okay? I was just in jail, but that cop you guys all know, he was attacking me, okay? He was attacking me, and, my wife here, who's gonna absolutely take my word for everything. You can take her word for it, it's fine. But then I needed to get in a cool one-liner. and the only way I could, fulfill that cool one-liner was to shoot him dead. He didn't have a weapon on him. He kept horror movie lunging at me. so I shot him like 5 times.
That lunge just spells the end.
But if 90s thrillers are your thing, which they kind of are mine,
Mm.
I love watching them this way. They're so ridiculous, and there should be so many consequences for that protagonist. But they're just so fun and exciting, and they get your blood pumping. It's fun. As long as you can acknowledge that there's stupid shit like that, you can have fun with it,
Right.
Yeah, So, yes, it's fun. And it has a good reputation, too. It's, the critics, I think, like it quite a bit. It has a good reputation. But it's just pretty silly a lot. But still, that doesn't necessarily take away from it. If anything, the silliness adds to it. So that's great. But, I mean, seriously, though. Like I said, theme-wise, and just the way it's constructed, everything, Lakeview Terrace is such an expertly crafted movie. It's really, like I said, there is some stuff in there, but there are large portions of Lakeview Terrace that I would go as far as to say are flawless. So, that's, yeah. So this is pretty easy.
This was never a challenge.
But still, Unlawful Entry is something that, if you haven't, just for shits and giggles, you'll want to check it out just to see. And, oh, yes, I was going to bring up, at the end of this movie, Madeline Stowe's name is Karen. And this follows Ray Liotta's 2 biggest roles at the time, Something Wild and Goodfellas. Field of Dreams had also come out, but his roles in Something Wild and Goodfellas are, that's pretty much where you go when you think Ray Liotta. So, the climax of this movie, if you think it looks like every other thriller, there are a couple of other movies it probably looks like. He is attacking this woman's person, her significant other, while he has her handcuffed in the bathroom. This is the end of Something Wild, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And are you having flashbacks when you're watching Unlawful Entry and you keep hearing Ray Liotta screaming, Karen! Karen! Are you having severe Goodfellas flashbacks? God damn it, Karen!
Wow.
Yeah, it's very... But yes, Unlawful Entry absolutely positively knew how to use its Ray Liotta. And that's what's important. So, that's what those are. It's a fun double feature for sure.
I'm sure it was.
And throw Internal Affairs in there if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that ends another edition of Versus, and that's also going to bring to end pretty much the weekend here on the Podcast Network. AJ's movie reviews was 2 days ago, and we talked about Green Room, and Neighbors 2, and The Nice Guys. And Angry Birds is saved for next week. It'll be on with Alice Through the Looking Glass and X-Men Apocalypse. So
that should be
that's going to be a weird video. So yesterday I did a Sip and Snack, and check that out. Later tonight we have the Extreme Rules podcast 11:30 p.m. and the Raw podcast Monday night 11:30 p.m. And like I said, I welcome Random Tales to pop officially on Thursday with Sip and Snack. Sip and Snack Random Flavors, which is starting. As always, this is the last day for it, so I want to throw this last message to you guys. This will be the last time I get to say this before everything, because it'll be over by then. Throughout the last month, Kevin Owens and Tyler Breeze have been trying to raise money to help out the victims of the Fort McMurray wildfires in Alberta, Canada. And there has been a GoFundMe that I have been continuously putting over to get the word out about this great cause. And I'm going to say it one more time. You have until tonight, and even if it's not after that, you can still donate to the Canadian Red Cross. Right now, it's GoFundMe.com /22VQM7W, and there'll be a link in the description bar, and you can help out and make Fort McMurray strong again. So
I'm afraid of what this video looks like right now on mute. It's just me, just kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. It's like Talladega Nights. I don't know what to do with my hands.
So yeah, if you can donate, do so. You only have a couple more hours left, obviously. Extreme Rules is the deadline, but you can still donate to the Canadian Red Cross if you're able to. And also, than that, I want to thank everyone for watching. Versus next week to be announced. That's not the cryptic comment. It's just literally we don't have one for the final verses of May. Oh my god, it's almost June. This is amazing how quick the year's going by. When your vacation's in September, it is. So, that being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. If you are inclined to purchase any Podcast Network merchandise, it's Zazzle.com/Podcast Network, and we have a Facebook fan page under Podcast Network on Facebook. That being said, thank you guys and girls out there for watching, and until tomorrow, boys and girls, that's all we got to say about that. Any parting words, AJ?
No, I was done 4 minutes ago.